Hi there, it's Tiffany from Daisy Farm Crafts, and today I'm going to do a tutorial for this nice cotton sweater made with Bernat Softy cotton, and I've actually pulled in a few colors from the Softy Baby cotton line. Don't worry, they're the exact same weight, practically the same in every way, just one is sold as baby and one is just kind of found in the adult section or the regular yarn section if you're trying to find this, like at Joann's, and this one is in the baby section, but they're basically the same. I think these two colors were the baby colors and the rest of the sweater was Softy cotton. You'll need two of this main color, and then of course whatever colors you choose right here. You'll just need one. You'll have a ton left over though, so hopefully you make more than one sweater, find other projects. I'm using a herringbone stitch for the main portion, and this is single crochet, and then this is double crochet ribbing. I also am using a G 4.0 millimeter hook. It's always helpful to have stitch marker on hand, and of course you'll need tapestry needle. So stitch markers help to help you on the turning rounds to identify first and last stitch, like when you're joining underneath the armhole. So other than that, okay, let's get started. This baby sweater starts with 51 chains. And we'll begin with one row of herringbone half double crochet starting in the second chain from the hook. So if you need a refresher on how the herringbone is worked, you yarn over, pull up a loop, and continue pulling through that first loop, and then pull through two. Let me demonstrate that one more time. Yarn over, insert your hook, pull up a loop, continue pulling through the next loop, and then pull through two. So work one herringbone in each of the chains for 50 herringbone. Now I need to have you place some stitch markers. So place a stitch marker in the 11th stitch, which make sure you don't count the turning chain as a stitch. Count this is your, so it looks like the second little V, that's your first stitch. 2, 3, you'll have 10, and then place it in the 11th, and then also place one in the 15th. So there should be 5 stitches marked here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. This is your 5th stitch right here. These are our little shoulders. Then place 20 stitches in between and mark the 21st stitch, which will be stitch number 1 of the shoulder. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So we've got 5 stitches marked right here. And then of course you should have 10 left. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. So this will form our little collar. And how I always do the math for this is that generally, if you think of it this way, I do 10 for the front equals the 20 across the back, and I add 5 for the shoulders. All right, now let's start increasing our rounds. So I had done that chain 1 and turn already. So what we will do is work herringbone half into each stitch up to that stitch marker. So let's work 10. And if you're struggling with this herringbone, I kind of do have to kind of pinch it down at that base in order to get the hook to turn and get it through. Okay, here we are at our first stitch marker. So now we can remove it. And in this stitch, we work 1 herringbone, 2 chains, and another herringbone. That's what I'm calling the corner. Those are our corners. We'll increase every round in those corners. Now let's work the next 3 stitches with herringbone. And in this stitch, let's work another corner. Herringbone, 2 chains, and herringbone. Okay, now repeat that for these stitches over here. So this is what now we're forming that little neckline. This is what it should look like. All right, we'll always chain 1 and turn. And always work into the very first stitch. And now you'll want to work in each stitch up to the chain 2. Just make sure that you don't forget, don't skip over it, and also don't skip the one that comes after it. So we're only working the corner around the chain 2s. So here's one of them right here. And if you have a hard time seeing it, make sure that you could put a stitch marker around the chain 2s, because you don't want to increase too much and accidentally go into the second chain, because sometimes that can look like a stitch. That's where your increase will be. But first, let's work herringbone, chain 2, herringbone, and then work into that first stitch. I would say pay the closest attention to making sure you don't skip that stitch or get an extra stitch in there somehow. That will kind of make your, it can affect the front of your sweater. Okay, so you're going to increase just like this. And I'll hop back on and show you how to make the armholes. So I have increased 11 rows, and this gives you about a 3 to 6 month size. Now, if you would like to increase the size and make it larger, you will add 2 more rounds. And I believe with each extra 2 rows, you could make this maybe the 6 to 9 months and then up to 12 months. I haven't experimented with 18 months, but basically what you want to do is just keep increasing. I'll have a size chart on my website where you can refer to the width of the shoulder, but keep in mind that the shoulder is actually right here. This just comes down just a little bit. Let me show you on the little sweater here what I'm talking about. So it's not like the true shoulder is right here. That kind of lands midway down the shoulder. So you can kind of get an accurate measurement. Another measurement that I'll have is just to measure the depth of the armhole. And that can help you when you're increasing for size to get you a larger size. But the neck really should fit almost up to, I would say, 18 months, a 2-year-old for sure. I think you'd have to adjust the neck size if you went larger than a 2-year-old, but I haven't made those samples yet, so you'll have to wing it. And then of course, all you'd have to do is, increase the length here, but through the width, when you're naturally increasing the round before you join, that will increase as well. So that's one tip on how to get a larger sized sweater. So anyway, we will join this round on the 12th because we'll just still make it, I'm going to make this one another baby size, small, about 3-month size sweater. So I've already chained one and turned and worked my herringbone to the first corner. And now I'll just work one herringbone, and this time I'm going to chain 4 because I want even a little bit more width through the bodice. You simply grab to the next corner, kind of pinch them together, or just, actually you don't even need to do that. Just work your 1/2 double crochet into that next corner. That's all. So you've got your chain 4s, and you just made yourself the armhole, the first armhole. Now work in each stitch across the back with a herringbone and do the exact same thing. So I've worked my way across the back, and now it's time to join and make the next armhole. So I'll show you that again. Work 1 herringbone around the chain 2 space, chain 4, and again, that number could even be flexible. If you have a real chubby baby that you're working for and you want it even looser, you can add as many chains there that you would like. Kind of match the corners if you want, make sure. Oh, but here it is. I've brought that other corner towards me, and that's where I work another herringbone. And there's your armhole. Now work herringbone into, each stitch to the end. All right, so let me show you what your sweater should look like now that we've joined and made the little armholes. So here's your little 4 chains. Add a little bit more width to the bodice, and go ahead and take that measurement. Say that you increased, that gives you a good indication of the width of the bodice to measure from here to here. One thing, that's what I always do with my sweaters, is I just kind of have a tape measure around with me, and I'm just measuring and getting it to be the best fit. And I don't worry too much if there's a gap, because I can always go back and we'll add a placket for buttons or however we decide to put the sweater together. Okay, so now I'll chain 1 and turn. And now I'll just work in each stitch all along, and I'll make sure I work 1 herringbone in each of those 4 chains that are underneath in the armpit area. Okay, there we go. You got your first, that from here on out, it should be pretty easy. Let's do our first color change. So I'm going to add in sandstone. That's the first color I used on this one too. I'm going to go ahead and do the same. Maybe sub a few of the different colors out, but let's start with sandstone. So I'm just pulling through. I won't cut the beige color. I'm not going to cut that. This one, I'll just carry it along the side. So now I will work 1 stitch into each stitch for 2 rows. So I chose a couple different colors for this version. I kind of wanted it to be a little bit more masculine looking. So this is my boy version. This is the girl version. And before you get going further, off camera, I wove in my ends and I've got one more to go. So it's a pretty good idea to stop and take the time on this step to get all of those ends woven in before we start adding the bottom and the sides and the collar. After you've finished those last 2 rows, all those ends are woven in, I'm going to chain 2 and turn my work, and I'll continue to still work right into the first stitch with 1 double crochet. Now work 1 double crochet into each stitch along the bottom of the sweater. That will start the very first base row for the ribbing stitch that we'll do along the bottom. So 1 double crochet into each stitch. All right, I just worked my 1 complete row of double crochet along the bottom of the sweater, and I'm going to chain 2 and turn. And now I will work my first front post double crochet on that second stitch in. And then I'll work a back post double crochet. Continue alternating that all down the row. Okay, so here is what 1 row should look like of alternating post stitches. Now down here I've worked around the last double crochet post and I still have those chain 2s, so I go ahead and work 1 regular double crochet around the chain 2 turning chain, and I'll chain 2 and turn. And on this row all you'll need to do is match the direction of the posts. So if it's a back post double crochet, make it a back. This one's popping to the front, so I'll pop that one to the front. And so I end this row again with 1 regular double crochet underneath the turning chain. Chain 2 and turn your work. Okay, so we have worked for a total of 4 rounds. 1, 2, 3, 4. The first round being that row of double crochet, and then 3 rounds of the ribbing. So what you want to do is make sure that your sweater, if it matters to you, this is considered the right side of the work. How I can tell is because the 2 rows of color look more complete. You can tell that that's 2 rows. This is the inside, and you can see the difference. It's just a minor thing if that matters to you. If you want this facing on the outside, you want to end your ribbing work over here so that we can have the right side facing us as we work around the front of the sweater and down the neck. So what you'll do is go ahead, and I did chain 1. And now we're going to work a series of 3 single crochets around each post for this section. It's kind of the neatest way I could get this to look. And then you'll work 3 single crochets per 2 rows. So just pick one of the end of the rows and work 3 single crochets. Now here I'm covering up that carried yarn that we had. Okay, so I've made it to the first little corner here, and I'll work. So just work the 1 single crochet and now chain until you have about the length of the front of the sweater and maybe just a bit more. So just chain, chain, chain. Okay, I kind of ran into some technical difficulties and part of my video didn't get recorded. So what I've done is I've come up to this corner, I worked that single crochet, you chain the length of the front of the sweater to get this first tie made, and go ahead and count how many you did, and then work your way back up the chain with slip stitches. And I am working into the back bump. So turn your chain over and work into the back bump of each one for your first tie. And slip stitch into each one of those chains. And now you're back to the very first single crochet that you made, or that last single crochet that you made in the corner, and now slip stitch into each stitch around the neck. And that will give a nice little finish around the neck of the sweater. After you've slip stitched all the way across the collar and you're back to this other side, now make chains just about the same length as the other side, about the length of the front of your sweater. Feel free, if you want it to be exact, to count your chains after you make them that length, and then you can always, make sure that the chains are the same on each side. And then we'll slip stitch into the back again of each one of those chains back up to the top, and then we'll work those single crochets down the other side. Okay, so I've slip stitched all the way back down that tie there, and now I'll start kind of the reverse. I just did a single crochet and then work 3 single crochets per 2 rows going down the front of the sweater. Okay, I just worked all the way down the front of the sweater and just worked that last single crochet into the corner here and just tied off, and I'll weave in that end. And next you will start and show the start the sleeve, and I demonstrate that on the cream sweater, so don't be alarmed if the colors change here in this next little bit. So onward to making the sleeve. Now I'm going to show you how to get the sleeve portion started. Okay, first thing you want to do is make sure that you are working against the V's as if you chained and turned. So if I was to start working this way, that's not correct because the V's are pointing this way. So I need to address the sweater so that I'm working around this way against the loops as if I chained and turned. So I will insert my hook underneath. You can pick either one. Remember we have the 4 chains underneath. I'm just picking one of the middle chains and inserting my hook underneath one of the loops like that. And I will pull up a loop. Okay, let me get my yarn started here. So I like to just pull up a loop, kind of leave a longish tail so I can weave it in later. I will chain 1, that kind of pulls it tight and locks it down, and then I make my first stitch right into that same spot. So there is my first herringbone. Now, if you have problems identifying your stitches, go ahead and place a stitch marker in this very first stitch so that you'll know that that was the first stitch of the round, and that will be the stitch that will join at the end of the round. Now let's work into that second chain space. And here's where we have, you can see the side, and it's up to you if you want to work. Sometimes I do a herringbone kind of 2 together so that I don't have so much of a hole underneath the arm here. And I work into that next stitch. It helps to combine the stitches together. And then you can just easily work 1 stitch going all the way around. Now here we are coming back down the other side, and so you'll want to mirror what you did on the other side. So I'm going to do 1 half double herringbone together, which I just pull through that first loop, and then I pull them all the way together. And then here's my remaining 2 chains that are part of the 4 that made up the armhole. We'll work into that last one. Now we'll need to slip stitch to the very first stitch where your stitch marker was, but on this round we need to introduce the so we'll need to pull through with the sandstone color. Chain 1, turn your work, now you don't work right into where you slip stitched. You want to work into the first stitch of the row. So again, if that's confusing, mark the last stitch so that you know. It's a good way to learn what those stitches look like. So here we go. Just so you know, mark the first stitch. This one actually will be pretty odd. Well, let's just keep going because it helps. It does actually help when you change colors because you'll know what the first stitch is because it's a different color. But anyway, it's good to get into the little habit of marking those stitches to help you. So here we go. I'm working just now. I just get to work 1 into each stitch. And another tip after this round, probably I could have done it after the next round too. I like to count how many stitches I made, just so that when I go to do the other side, the other sleeve, I will be making the exact same amount. Okay, I'm working the very last stitch of the row. Just like that. And like I say, if that is confusing to you, okay, here's the first stitch. Pay attention to that. If you have a hard time seeing the slip stitches and the chain one different from the stitch, mark this, because this becomes the first stitch of the round. So now I'm going to slip stitch, chain one, turn my work. So it looks like you would start right there, but you don't. This is the first stitch where the stitch marker was. So it's really helpful. Till you really learn that, and that will help your sleeves stay the same. You'll have the same amount of stitches in each round. All right, that's what you'll do. Repeat those color changes. And here's so this sleeve is already done. So it's 2 rows and then 2, 2, 2, 2. End with 2 rows, and then I'll pop back on and I'll show you what to do with the, we're going to decrease this round with some single crochets before we start the ribbed cuff. So now we have the sleeve done, and I like to just bring the bottom of this in just a little bit before we start the ribbing. So after you have your 2 rows, and I will say if you are adding, and this is going to be longer for you, you're making a bigger sweater, just repeat the colors, but end with 2 rows of the cream. And what you'll do is make a series of 1 single crochet in each of the next 2 stitches, and then a single crochet 2 together. So that will help decrease the number of stitches in this round. So 1 single crochet in each of the next 2, and here's a single crochet 2 together. Insert your hook, pull up a loop, insert your hook into the next stitch and pull up a loop, and then pull through all 3 loops. So just repeat that sequence all the way around to decrease the number of stitches. Now, if it doesn't work out exactly perfect, that's okay. Just finish the sequence however it works out. Now I'll join with a slip stitch to the first stitch, and this time I will chain 2 in turn, because now we will be working 1 double crochet into each stitch going around. This is our first round of the ribbing. We need to get a base layer, a base round of all double crochet. Join with a slip stitch at the end of the round to the first stitch, chain 2 and turn. And now this round will start the ribbing. So to do that, you reach your hook down around the first stitch, pop it forward, and around the next stitch, you pop that post to the back and work your double crochet as normal. So this is called front post double crochet when you pop it to the front of your work, and back post double crochet when we are popping it towards the back of our work. So I just worked my last stitch of the round, and all that's left is that chain 2 of the row below, and so I ignore that. And then here's my chain 2. This is the one time where I like to just slip stitch right into that chain 2 space. I don't worry about slip stitching to the top of the stitch. And then I turn, and now you'll match the direction of the ribbing. So if there's a back post double crochet in the row below, keep it back post. And here's front post. We want these posts to line up and give us the illusion of ribbing. Plus it makes the wrist a little bit stretchier too. Kind of is like a little elastic to bring it in. And I think it always just is such a nice looking, sweater looking finish. All right, you'll continue this for, let me see how many I did on the other side that made it look nice. Okay, I did my base row and then 2, 3, 4. So for a total of 4 rounds of double crochet. So there was the base, 2, 3. So this is the 3rd round. Work 1 more round after this. All right, here's the end, round 4. Let me show you, I just slip stitched to the final chain 2 space. So right there. And I'm just going to give myself 1 chain, really lock that down tight. Give me a little bit long of a tail. Pull that through and I'll weave that end in, and we've got our cute little sleeve all done. That's what I love. I love that we just get that little extra, the narrowing into the wrist. I think that looks really cute. Okay, well, I really hope that your little sweater turned out just adorable. I hope you come and show us in the Daisy Farm Crafter group on Facebook, or hashtag your photo, Daisy Farm Crafts, and share it on Instagram. And we'd love to see how your cute little sweater turns out. Love to see what colors that you chose. So anyway, have a good day.